Very good morning, all of you. I feel really excited and honored to be in front of all of you and specifically talking about one of the important topics which I'm inspired and excited about, which is the digital public goods in India and India's success story around DPGs, right? Uh, Me talking about digital public goods in the forum of Sunbirds is like preaching to the choir because all of you have seen the impact of digital public goods, but this is going to be, as in I'm going to talk in next few minutes about my outsider perspective, who has been looking into the societal problems and technology for some time, how I feel inspired and excited about contributing towards digital public goods, and why this would be a great forum for all of you to contribute towards Sunbird as well. So this is going to be about quick story on how the outsider perspective on India's success story around DPGs and what I feel are the opportunities ahead for us. So to start with, is in we all have kind of lived experiences in India, which has significantly changed in last few years, right? So I will start with some of the my personal experiences and story. So this is the first story where I was recently in one of my relatives who was visiting India after pandemic, after 3 years for the first time. And as we started traveling and we were taking short road trips, for the entire trip, I did not have to use cash at all for my 3 days road trip in India. Because every place where I visited, let it be restaurants at big cities to the small side, roadside coconut vendors, everywhere I could do the transactions through UPI. And this was completely surprising and eye-opener for my visitors who were visiting from the developed countries and Europe and US at that time, right? So this was an extremely proud moment for me, and I'm sure you have kind of lived these experiences yourself as we are navigating in everyday life. The second experience is about COVID. When COVID happened, all of us were completely going through a state of uncertainty. There was so much of confusion about vaccination, what would work and what would not work. But as the vaccination started, the experience that COVID provided in terms of getting through the whole vaccination program for the large population of India, and surprisingly such a pleasant experience of just getting the vaccination, and before even I came out of the vaccination center, I had received the SMS on my mobile phone. All my vaccinations were recorded, including the booster's dose. And my parents, who were 70 plus now, they were very pleasantly surprised and so felt proud that India is moving in this digital transformation, and the benefit is going through every individual, and equitably the benefits are kind of shared with the entire population. The third experience is very recent. I was going through a short domestic trip, and again completely surprised with the experience that DigiYatra, I think some of you would have already started using DigiYatra, and the Aadhaar enabled program which helped me navigate through the airport and complete my domestic travel in such a seamless manner, right? So all these experiences have been our lived experiences, and today we are taking these experiences for granted. But what really changed these experiences, right? These experiences were changed by the entire digital infrastructure which changed in India in last, let's say, the work which was going on for a decade, but we have started, I think, reaping the benefits of these transformations in primarily last 5 years, and more accelerated during the pandemic in last 3 years. So, I really, it got me thinking about, this is a hard problem, right? As in, we are living in a diverse society. And when we look at India, specifically, we have challenges which are unique to India and other global South countries. We have such a diverse population which has a huge spectrum of affordability if we look at the population itself. We are a multilingual society. We have so many languages of interaction and low literacy. The third problem is about the digital access itself, right? So how these technologies are kind of made today, which seemed like a magic for me, and which got me thinking about public goods. As in, when we typically think of public goods, this is, I think many of you would recognize this picture, right? This is the Electronic City flyover. So most of the country's infrastructure and the growth is dependent on the public goods, which we, in the last century, we thought about public goods in the form of the physical infrastructure, which could be the roads, which could be dams, which could be power plants, and which are really kind of building the infrastructure, which is giving the growth opportunities for the country to kind of grow. There are two important properties of these public goods, which I thought was really important, and I think this is really important building block of digital public goods as well, right? The two important properties of these public goods has been non-excludability, which means that once the service or the commodity is provided, you can't stop anyone benefiting from the good. And which is so hard to solve as a problem when we are thinking of society like India, which, as I mentioned, is so diverse in terms of all forms of affordability and languages and whatnot. The second important property is non-rivalry, which means that if somebody benefits from the good, it does not reduce the amount of amount available for others. So when we are creating the digital public infrastructure and we are building and contributing towards digital public goods, I thought that these are really kind of the fundamental properties and the building blocks that we need to keep in mind while designing every single line of code that we write, every single design that we kind of think of, to make sure that how the digital public goods that we are going to build is going to be inclusive and equitable. So as in we are moving into the new century, most of our services, as we are transforming with technology, most of our services are digital. So this Digital Public Goods Alliance has given a very nice definition of digital public goods, which is combining the digital technologies in the form of electronic tools, systems, devices, and resources that generate and store process data. So now the public goods are no longer the physical infrastructure that we have seen in the last century, but it's more about the digital infrastructure that we are bringing for the nation building and for the growth of the nation. So what could be the properties, as we saw non-excludability and non-rivalry as one of the important properties of these public goods? What could be and what should be the properties of digital public goods? And this is again interesting definition which is given by Digital Public Goods Alliance, which means that open source software, open data, open AI models, open standards, open content that adhere to the basic principles of privacy, other applicable laws, best practices, and the important part of do no harm by design, and help attain the sustainable development goals. And eventually contributing and taking the contributions from the community, and this is so great to kind of see morning while we still have the problems of our traffic jams and the infrastructure which is still kind of scaling up. On a weekday morning, seeing such a huge community present here for the event is basically contributing towards this whole effort of open data, open AI models, open software, so that everyone, you and me, can contribute to the nation building and building these digital public goods, which would eventually serve towards solving some of the sustainable development goals. So when we are thinking about digital public goods, right, there are some of the important properties of digital public goods which need to be kind of taken into account. And this is where I thought that open source movement and open source approach has nicely kind of, blends with the objectives of digital public goods. So the first property for any good digital public goods is digital sovereignty. So the nations should be able to use the power of these softwares or the digital infrastructure without getting logged in with specific vendors or without getting logged in with the private players. And I think this is a very important thing when we are looking at the digital infrastructure, which is going to be used for our primary needs of the nations, which includes the security or the benefits which are being transferred to the citizens. This is extremely important that there is no vendor lock-in, and there is a digital sovereignty in the infrastructure that we are building. There should be adaptability. So the digital public goods which are being developed, they need to be kind of easily adopted in the entire infrastructure systems. Scale comes by design. So we are scaling for the nations. And when we talk about the nations like India, we are always building our user bases of 1.4 billion users, right? So scalability comes as the first principle while designing any of these systems. Adaptability is in when, let's say, the digital public goods which is being developed in India today is in we are already seeing so much excitement and interest to take these digital public goods from India to other countries, including many countries in global south. So which means that what we have built here should be adaptable to the local needs in the other nations, and that should come by design and principles as the first principle while designing these systems. The next important point is the project sustainability. So today, let's say we have built, you all would be looking into Sunbird and Diksha today. The system is deployed as the instance in Diksha based on the current needs and requirements. But as I think Krishna mentioned earlier, so while it was designed for a specific purpose, when COVID hit and there was a need for, let's say, providing the digital certification of the vaccinations, the same digital infrastructure could be easily adapted on a new problem. And depending upon the ongoing needs of the system and the infrastructure, it also requires a sustainability so that the existing projects can easily scale to the new requirements and the new upcoming challenges that would come as we would progress in the time. And the last one, which is extremely important, which is about the transparency and accountability. So when we are building systems like Aadhaar and when we are doing the payments transactions using UPI, it's important that we trust that system. And for the trust, I think the technologists like you and me can have a great contribution here to make sure that the technology is safe. And that we can do through transparency and accountability. When this technology is open source, when you and me and the entire community can contribute towards this technology, it automatically gives the transparency, trust and accountability into the system. And hence, all these principles of digital public goods can be easily catered to in the open source system. So the principles of open source are the nice tools to kind of, provide these properties to digital public goods, and that's how I thought that this is a great the way the digital public good, instead of logged into the proprietary infrastructure and with the proprietary and specific vendors, the community like us is going to greatly help in building the new technologies and new digital public infrastructure for our nation as well as for the entire world. So as all of you're already aware of, as in this is a proud moment for me as an Indian, I would say, to basically look at the entire infrastructure that is being built, being used by the entire population, and so much more to kind of come in. And your lines of code that you would be writing is going to kind of, come here as new services, new technologies, new digital public goods. And this is really, this gives me goosebumps when I think about the user base that we can impact. So, all of you are aware of, I suppose, India Stack. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on talking about what India Stack is. But the nice part of the design that, as a technologist, really makes me happy is the way, the modular way in which this entire infrastructure is built. So there are horizontal layers of identity, payments, data empowerment or data transactions layers, but these all horizontal layers are being nicely intercoupled and used as part of the vertical services which can be provided to the end users, including the technologies in healthcare and education, e-commerce and financial services. So the design of these specific tools and services, while being modular, those being kind of thought of as generic value to the entire infrastructure is something which is, I think, unique to this. So just to kind of highlight specific layers and the impact of those, right? So as we know, identity layer primarily was thought of as giving every resident a unique ID and enabling them to prove I am who I claim to be, right? And we have seen that Aadhaar, which was the biometric-based unique identification number, has enabled the identity and for many citizens, this was the first time the proof of identity which was available in the form of Aadhaar. While eKYC, which was built on top of the Aadhaar-based authentication, is now giving me electronic know your customer process, which allows the paperless and presence-less communication of doing the KYC for every service that I might be using in the commercial space, in the private space, or in the public space. And this has significantly reduced the time that it would take for citizens to basically avail these services. So that's the beauty of layering the basic benefits of Aadhaar and the ID for other sorts of benefits which are coming from the identity layer and other layers as well. Similarly, e-sign as in which would provide the electronic authentication. The numbers are massive, right? As in 1.3 billion digital identities through UID. But what is interesting is not only scale, but the value imparted by Aadhaar in other government programs, like opening new bank accounts for the first time for 860 million unique Aadhaar-linked bank accounts through Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, or the number of authentications which are happening on Aadhaar on everyday basis. So on one side, as in this has created a technology infrastructure, but on the other side, it has created a value through government's policies and framework to now give the direct benefits to the intended recipients without leakage into the system. And this is, I think, is the huge impact alongside the scale, that the value which is really kind of going to the end user in terms of this entire system. Similarly, as in all of us have seen that UPI has changed the experiences for each one of us as individuals, as well as the small and medium businesses, as well as the village level entrepreneurs. Everyone's experience on doing the digital transactions and digital payments has completely changed with UPIs. Similarly, the Aadhaar enabled payment service, this is allowing end users to kind of doing the transaction similar to any debit card or credit card using their Aadhaar ID and using the Aadhaar linked bank account. So this is a huge, I think, a step change from where we were 5 years back or 10 years back before the Aadhaar linked bank accounts were enabled through this Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. And finally, which is one of the very interesting layer for me in this entire architecture, I think of it as a data layer, right? Which is basically thinking about data governance and the privacy of users' data as the very basic principle in providing this entire infrastructure and specific services to the end users and the entire population at the end of the day. Many of us have been using DigiLocker, which has completely changed the way we provide the certification, or we use our specific, let's say, the agreements or certificates in the everyday life. But another interesting part for me was also this account aggregator, which is a consent manager in the financial ecosystem. So what this has enabled is primarily allowing the electronic documents and the financial documents to be shared between one financial institution to other financial institution in the paperless and presence-less manner. And the impact of this is the number of the time which has been significantly reduced for lending process. So today, let's say if as a small farmer or as a small village level entrepreneur, I want to go and get some loan for a small amount, the amount of time it used to take to process this whole system through the paper-based transactions and from going from one financial institution to another financial institution, it has kind of significantly reduced from months to days now. And this is going to impact the economy eventually in terms of getting more village level entrepreneurs, more SMEs, and getting them right financial aid at right point of time. So on one side, as in, this is just to highlight that on one side there are scale which has been, huge scale which is being provided by technology, but the value that we are seeing now getting unbundled as part of these layers is enormous. Many of you are already aware that India stack is no longer relevant only for India, but now it's going global, right? There are several countries worldwide who are interested in taking this technology to their own specific nations and to cater to their specific needs. Open source is also enabling it to make it adaptable for their local community needs, as well as deploying it in the low cost and effective manner. And the challenges are not solved, right? There are several challenges that we need to still kind of solve as part of the digital public goods, and that's where you and me can come and contribute to it more in the form of digital public goods. And today's bootcamp is, I think, your way of contributing to this whole specific initiatives. So I thought I'll just give example of, as Microsoft, as part of the Microsoft and coming from Microsoft Research, which is the commercial organization, how the commercial organizations like MSR are also contributing to DPG. So one of the challenges for us is, as India, we have 22 constitutional languages and 60 plus languages with 1 million plus users. So how can we make these layers and services to be accessible to the people with low digital literacy and speaking one of the many Indian languages? So in this regards, we are, so this is just the graph of the languages, these 60 languages based on their population, right? And while Hindi and Bengali and Marathi and few others would be on the left side, there are many small languages, including Gondi and Mundari, which are being spoken by large set of communities, but there are no technology infrastructure, which is a language technology infrastructure, which is available today. So we are contributing in both sides of the language spectrum. So one is we are contributing to AI for Bharat, which many of you would know, which is a collaborative effort between Nilekani Philanthropies, EkStep, IIT Madras and MSR, where we are building language technologies for many major Indian languages, which are at par with English language performance, again based on the principles of DPG in terms of open tools, open data, open models, and creating language-based interfaces. We also have another effort, which is the ongoing project, which is called Project Ellora, which is primarily bridging the gap of the tail languages, which have very low digital resources, or at times it would have very few speakers. But when we are talking about the equitable access to the technologies that we are building, it's important that we reach to every citizen in the language that they are comfortable with and they can speak and interact with. So this is the interesting collaborative approach wherein government's initiative of Bhashini, which is building the technology for multiple languages, is being powered by this collaborative effort of AI for Bharat and the partners, including EkStep and Microsoft Research's contribution as well. But now we are able to build this technology and take it to the end user. The end user is going to be our farmer, end user is going to be Asha worker, end user is going to be teacher, or the student that would be using Diksha system. And tomorrow, how we enable these language technologies, which are available in many, as in all of us are completely, I think, have got excited, and there is a huge hype about GPT-3 and Chat GPT and whatnot. And I'm sure that as technologists, many of you would have tried getting your hands on with some of these technologies. How can we make sure that all these upcoming technologies are available to our Asha workers, to our teachers, and to our students is exciting challenge that for all of us to address. The second contribution that we are looking into is the data privacy, which is around the DAPA and the data empowerment layer. How can we make sure that user data is kept private while still providing the access to these services? And this is going to be one of the major concerns when using DPG, and this is one of the concerns that need to be kind of addressed head on when we are contributing to DPG, that how we cater to the basic principles and basic rights of individuals while basically participating in all these services. So many of you would have heard about DAPA, which is the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, which gives the data governance and the policy framework for consent-based data sharing. And what I talked about as the consent manager earlier, or account aggregator, which is basically extending these principles of consent-based sharing. As a user, I should be able to give consent to my, let's say, bank statement to be given to one particular institution to for the purpose of only, my credit analysis that I request right now. But this should not be perpetually kind of, should be staying with this organization. They should not be shared with anyone else, which means that users' data should always be used with the consent. Users' data also need to be used for a very specific purpose for which the user has given consent. So all these frameworks and principles have been talked about as part of DEPA framework. And confidential clean rooms, which is basically a technology which is open source and contributed by Microsoft, is giving the technical guarantees of privacy and compliance in DEPA. So how the specific transactions, like in this case shown from the data provider and data consumer for the loan or the insurance, can be executed and guaranteed that this data is not shared outside the purpose and outside the required providers for my specific purpose. So finally, I think I would like to kind of end with why we should participate is in this movement, right? And when I say we as an individual and technologists, as all of you are here today, as well as we as organizations, as in why this movement is important. So I think the first important thing is unique opportunity to contribute towards equitable digital India. And we have seen, as I was talking to Alok as well earlier, what is shown by Aadhaar and UPI is a great demonstrations that this is possible. We can actually digitally contribute to, as technologies, we can have a great value addition to nation building and the building blocks that involve as part of this entire growth and economy of the nation by contributing with our skills, that is the technological skills available today. We have a massive and diverse user base. So many of you might be coming from the product side development, right? Or many of you would be part of the consumers and working as part of the services. The exciting part as a technologist for us is always the user base, right? So what is the value which is created at the end of the day by the lines of code that I'm writing or the product idea that I'm thinking, how it impacts the end user on the ground, and what is the scale of that impact, right? How many users I'm impacting at the end of the day. Here the user base is, first of all, if we talk about India, it's the entire set of citizens. And I think for any commercial product company, the user base cannot get more than this, right? And when we are thinking about India's stack or the digital public goods kind of going international, now we are talking about the entire population of the world. And for no commercial product or entity or organization, the impact can get, and the user base can get bigger than this. And the other important thing is when we think about the specific product ideas, many times those are kind of focused for niche market or niche user base. So if I'm, let's say, building, and some of you might be coming from the EdTech industry as well, we might be targeting a very focused community or a user group. It might be starting with some of the assumptions of digital access that this community would have. But now when we are working with digital public goods, we cannot come up with those assumptions, right? We have to kind of think about the inclusive and equitable access for this entire diverse population. And this is the opportunity which is again given by contributions to DPG, because the user base is not only massive, but it's completely diverse. So you have to think about every possible end user and their access and abilities today and cater to those needs. The opportunity to innovate on the ground, which means that this is not like set in stone, right? All the DPGs are evolving. They need to be sustainable and catering to the end use cases and users' needs on everyday basis. So learnings that, and I'm sure when you talk with the Sunbird team in next 2 days, they have huge amount of learnings coming from deploying and building these technologies on the ground, and every time doing the iterations and working with the stakeholders in the education system, starting from the governments and to the teachers and the students from the government schools who they are interacting as the end users on everyday basis. So this is the opportunity to really get on the ground and innovate on the ground depending upon the needs of the community. and learning experience to work with the interdisciplinary community. As in, if we just look at the community who is present here today, I'm sure that each one of us are coming from completely different backgrounds and experiences, as well as lived experiences that we have gone through. And this is our ability to kind of, leverage each one's skills and abilities and experiences to make sure that what we build at the end of the day is basically creating huge impact in the society. So with this, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here with all of you today and share my thoughts as the outsider, but someone who is completely inspired by DPG's story, and looking forward to my further contributions to this effort as well. Thank you so much.